Hi everyone, this is Justina. Welcome back, or welcome to Investigative Selfism, and let me jump into today's topic, which is kind of like a continuation of the previous episode, which was on deep listening. So it's still within, everything's within the realm of communications, and obviously I don't want to oversimplify and say that communication is all about just listening and responding. But in the way, if we think of good communication as a type of communication where we can connect more deeply with others, then obviously deep listening is important, and us responding in an empathetic way, responding with empathy, that's super important. In my previous episode I was saying, okay, so if we're listening deeply, what does that look like, and what would that look like in our responses? And I think when we talk about that, we have to talk about empathy, what that is, what are its attributes, how we get there, what it looks like in our communication, and also want to talk today about a list of very concrete obstacles to empathetic communication. So once again, it's not just, what I think about communication. No, this is what psychology, social science research, nonviolent communication is a discipline. This is what all of them tell us. So it's not just some, ideas that I have, but they're actually from, they come from science, so to speak. And I think they're so valuable. They're so, it's such a cool, interesting way to deconstruct what good communication is and how we respond with empathy. I think it's so valuable, it's so practical, and that's why obviously I wanted to share this with you. So let me do that. But first we have to even identify what empathy is, describe it, and what's the difference, between empathy and sympathy, because these are two, they seem like synonyms, but actually it appears that it's actually quite different in real life, and how, once again, different types of research defines them. So a very simple definition, I guess, and the distinction between sympathy and empathy is that sympathy is more, let's say, if, someone says in a very basic way, let's say something bad happened to me, and the response is, oh, poor you, oh, that sucks, oh. So it's kind of not looking down, but it's just sort of feeling a bit pity maybe for the other person, which is, a reaction. And then what empathy is, or how empathy is described or defined, is more feeling that feeling, identifying what the feeling is and connecting on the level of that feeling to the person who is, let's say, telling you the story. And actually, interestingly, we do have a definition or some concrete attributes that it was Theresa Wiseman, a researcher, who defines 4 elements or attributes of empathy or empathetic responses, and I think very, very specific. So one is perspective taking. So you're putting yourself in the other person's shoes, this is what happened. Okay, I'm trying to imagine that situation, right? And then, and this is really difficult, staying away from judgment. No shaming, no blaming. That's a tough one, right? That's so tough. Just don't express judgment. Then recognizing the emotion that the other person is feeling. It's is it, is it sorrow? Is it anger? Is it disappointment? Is it frustration? What that is. And then the last point is summarizing what you see. So if someone says, I got, laid off my work, right? I lost my job. So instead of, shaming, blaming the person, blah, 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 first you sort of try to put yourself in the person's shoes. You, once again, don't say anything shaming or blaming. And then you think of, what is the, how is the person really feeling? So if you say, that must be, let's say knowing the situation, very disappointing, or that sounds very tough, or you must be feeling a bit anxious about your next step, right? It's kind of trying to identify and then connect to the emotion that the person is feeling. So you do that, and not to say that you have to sort of lie that, I've been there as well, but very often, whatever the situation is, maybe you haven't been laid off, from your job, but if the underlying emotion is, for example, disappointment or fear, very likely you can connect on the level of that emotion. So you don't have to say, I know exactly how you feel because I've also lost my job. Maybe you haven't, so like that's fine. But obviously, can you say, yeah, I felt like this as well at some point. Can you connect to that? And very likely you can. And this is that deeper empathetic connection that you could be bringing to your communication if you chose to. So I think that's very beautiful. I think that is what makes our communication just more meaningful in general. And I really like I very often talk about Brené Brown and her research in all my episodes, everything I talk about. But also, to continue that tradition, like this quote of hers, she's about empathy and these kind of responses. And she's saying, the truth is, rarely can a response actually, make something better. Like the response itself is not going to make anything better. But what makes it better is connection. And I think like that's the point, right? It's not about saying I've done the same thing, I know exactly how I feel, like I've been in that situation. No, but the feeling is familiar and we can connect. I can be there for you because I understand really what you're feeling, and I can acknowledge that, and I can only do that for now. I'm not gonna jump into anything else. I will stay with you in that emotion. So this is one big part of what empathy is and how that empathetic communication happens. It's still not very clear, right? These are sort of general principles, but these are, they're steps, but how you exactly implement them, obviously, hey, these are skills, these are practices, it's difficult. But that's why I also like a very concrete list of obstacles to empathetic communication. And when I've learned about them, and I did that when I was learning about nonviolent communication, a discipline that I really like and refer to very often when I, in this project of mine. And it was, now I really have to look at this list, it's a long list. It was Holly Humphrey, also a researcher, someone who actually works with nonviolent communication, like officially in the field, who identified several areas or several behaviors or tendencies to respond that are not empathetic, that they are like, don't do that, just please, can you not do, like, just look at this list and I try not to behave like that, because that all goes against what we would call an empathetic response. So let me give you this list. And I think honestly, when I was reading it, I thought, oh my God, at some point in my life, till this day, I've done all of them at some point, and I do some of them now. So I really have to be very conscious, very mindful, and remind myself that if someone wants that connection, if I want to connect with someone empathetically, just don't jump into one of those, or a combination, even worse. So what is this list? And please listen carefully, because I think you might recognize some of these behaviors, in your own behavior. I think it would be very weird if you didn't. So, let's just be honest with ourselves here. So what are those obstacles? So when someone tells you something not necessarily bad, but perhaps it is like a sad story, or maybe it's about you having done something that, made the person feel not great, right? So what would be our responses that would not be empathetic, that would go against those principles of empathetic connection? So one is advising. Yeah, so saying, let's say if, someone tells you, I'm not feeling well, like, I know what you should do. Let me tell you, I have some tips. I know we all want to do that, but can we at least keep it for later? Can we please first just listen to the person say, wow, that sucks. That is really bad. Wow. And then maybe later on some tips, but just don't jump into that. This is not why the person wants to connect with you, right? So advising, then educating, saying, you know what, this is actually like a positive experience, or you can learn from this, and not necessarily look at the bright side, but kind of try to squeeze all these learnings from that experience, which is something I am a fan of. I would say, like, of course, look at some shitty situation in your life, a horrible relationship, some painful experience, of course learn from it, like, of course. Just that when someone's telling you something, maybe that's not the first thing you want to hear, maybe not right away, right? So educating, try not to do that, even though paradoxically, I am trying to educate you now, but just don't educate people when what they're looking for is an empathetic connection. Then one-upping, saying, oh, what happened to you? That's nothing. what happened to me though, let me tell you. And I know it's there is a tendency, I think we all have it, to kind of try to give that perspective, saying, oh, actually what happened to me was even worse, so you listen to that. And once again, you can do that, but it's not going to provide the other person with that empathetic response that he or she might be looking for. So don't try not to do that. Then consoling, saying, oh, it wasn't your fault, you did all you could. It sounds kind of nice, but once again, you're not connecting to by saying that, you're not connecting to the actual feeling, like how the person is feeling right now. So that goes also against that empathetic connection. Even though it sounds kind of beautiful, right? It's like, why is that bad? Like, that's not what the person wants. You're not going to connect on that deeper level. And another one of my favorites, storytelling. My previous episode was saying, are you listening with an intent to learn about the person, or are you listening with an intent just to like tell your story? And this is like, that's it, saying, oh, what you're saying to me right now, it reminds me of this other thing. Let me tell you. And you just, take that narrative and, you kind of not necessarily derail the conversation, but you really make it about that other story. Not an empathetic response. Then interrogating, saying, how did that happen? Tell me more, give more details. Which sounds like, okay, you might seem like a good listener, but once again, does the person want to tell you everything, give you all the details, or is the point for you to really sit with that person in his or her emotion and ask him more questions? Interestingly, I myself, like, I love asking questions. Like, I have to tell myself to shut up and focus on empathy and not your curiosity, at the moment. Then explaining. So this is more if someone is talking about something that you did that they didn't like, right? Like, well, I was only doing this. At some point, maybe yes, but also not right away. That's not that empathetic response we're looking for. And the last one is sympathizing, right? Just a couple of minutes ago, I was saying sympathy is not the same as empathy, saying, oh, poor you. Yeah, oh, poor thing, oh, it happened to you. We don't want that pity. We want, once again, to connect on the deeper level to the emotion that the person's experiencing. So to say, oh, that's so bad, it happened to you, oh no. No, that's just like, that's not empathy. We know from research that the person's not gonna feel necessarily understood or listened to if this is your response, if this is the only response. So advising, educating, one-upping, consoling, storytelling, interrogating, explaining, or sympathizing. These are all obstacles. And I think it kind of makes sense, right? When you read about them, you learn, I was like, oh no, I've done all of those. And that's why also when you looking back or deconstructing some, maybe conversations you had with your friends, family members, someone where you didn't feel understood. You can say, was it maybe one of those? Maybe it was one of those, or a combo of those responses that made you, feel kind of, I don't know if I want to tell you stories again. If you say something like, oh, oh man, like this thing happened, like it was really bad. And for example, someone says, let's say, well, what did you expect? Of course that would have happened. Shaming, right? It's kind of shaming someone. Or saying, oh, I've done something even worse. It's that one-upping, saying something even worse happened to me, kind of almost like stealing the story. Or if someone tries to give you a piece of advice right away, we've all also been on that side, I think, of the conversation, right? And now, not only you can, knowing all this, not only you can be that good listener and, respond in an empathetic way, but also when it's not going well for you, when someone's not really connecting to you, you can say, like, you can deconstruct it and think, I think this person's not really showing that empathy, and he or she is actually doing this thing. So it's really interesting when you have those tools, when you're aware of like what could go wrong or what could go not too well, then it becomes easier to notice. Obviously notice that in yourself, and you have the power to correct it in yourself, right? And kind of notice when maybe someone doesn't have that and say, yeah, that was not the response I was looking for, and I actually know why exactly, even more interestingly. So I know that was a lot. I will put, all this information into the article that surrounds this episode, because it's unless you were taking notes, which would have been really cool, but it's difficult to remember, obviously. You kind of have to have this list in front of you. So I'm going to put everything I've mentioned in my, different materials surrounding this episode. And I really hope you use it. You remind yourselves, how, just of ways and very concrete, sort of examples, concrete, pieces of framework that you can use to be a better listener, a better conversation companion, just a better friend, a better, family member. You can really be that empathetic companion to someone. And I think that's so powerful, so beautiful. And that's something, if we're putting effort somewhere in our lives of being better communicators, it's like working on ourselves. I think it's such a beautiful area where we could be doing that. Because then you have the power to make like someone's day better, just by connecting with someone on a deeper level. There's so many benefits. I'm not going to go into all of them. I think they're pretty self-explanatory, even though, yes, I just did talk about them. But so, be a good listener. Try to bring that empathy into your communication. See what happens. See how people open up to you. See how you feel about yourself and others. I think it can be just such a beautiful experience. And hey, am I listening perfectly all the time? Am I responding with this, 200% of empathy, and I'm not jumping into one of those? Oh no. But that's why it's a practice. These are skills. And the first step is just to be aware of like what we could be learning, what we could be noticing. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this is useful. Please apply it, see what happens, and I hope you notice some really beautiful things. So thank you for your time. Once again, please use it. See what happens. Share with your friends if you find it useful, valuable, and interesting. I'd really appreciate it. So thank you, and I'll see you soon.